What's going on, guys? So today's video is the first of many in the next series that'll be featured on this channel, where we'll be exposing NBA voters using the media ballots that have been made available to the public by the NBA to allow for greater clarity and transparency between the voters, players, and the viewing public. Furthermore, because these votes do have financial implications for the players by way of the collective bargaining agreement, then holding media members accountable for their votes should not only be expected, but demanded. So in starting with the 2018-19 season, let's first look at some of the more controversial voters before breaking down specific categories, starting with Chinese announcer Kenneth Lau of Best TV, who cost a deserving forward an all-defensive first-team vote by having Philadelphia 76ers center Joel Embiid on his first-team ballot alongside Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors as a forward. Then there's his all-defensive second team, which featured Draymond Green's teammate and backup Jordan Bell, who averaged 11 minutes a game that season, along with Terrence Ferguson of the Oklahoma City Thunder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Los Angeles Clippers. And to put that ballot into perspective, it's important to mention that no other voter had Jordan Bell, Terrence Ferguson, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on any of their all-defensive team ballots except for Kenneth Lau. What's also puzzling is how Kenneth Lau could have Oklahoma City Thunder guard Terrence Ferguson on his all-defensive second team and not his teammate Paul George, who was third in Defensive Player of the Year voting that season. In fact, Kenneth Lau was the one voter that kept Paul George and Giannis Antetokounmpo from being unanimously voted onto the NBA's all-defensive team. And other notable defenders that were kept off of his ballot include Marcus Smart of the Boston Celtics, Drew Holiday of the New Orleans Pelicans, Kawhi Leonard of the Toronto Raptors, PJ Tucker of the Houston Rockets, and Eric Bledsoe of the Milwaukee Bucks. But as bad as his all-defensive selections were, his all-NBA ballot was just as controversial, as it featured Andre Drummond of the Detroit Pistons and Mavericks rookie Luka Doncic on the second team, as well as 16-year NBA veteran Dwayne Wade, who in his last season before retiring came off of the bench for the Miami Heat. In addition to that, his All-NBA third team featured rookie Marvin Bagley of the Sacramento Kings, who played in 62 games that season as a reserve. And please keep in mind that no other voter had Andre Drummond, Luka Doncic, Dwayne Wade, or Marvin Bagley on any of their All-NBA ballot that season except for Kenneth Lau. And in casting that ballot, Kenneth Lau chose to exclude Nikola Jokic, Paul George, LeBron James, Bradley Beal, Russell Westbrook, and Kemba Walker as better alternatives. What's also puzzling is how Kenneth Lau's All-NBA ballot could feature Raptors forward Pascal Siakam and not his teammate Kawhi Leonard, who was also excluded from Dennis Scott's All-NBA ballot, only to have Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge as his All-NBA third-team forwards instead. And while Kawhi Leonard did play in just 62 games that season, we do know that games played isn't the standard for Dennis Scott, as he had LeBron James, who played in just 55 games, on his All-NBA second-team ballot. Furthermore, his All-Defensive first team featured Oklahoma City Thunder guard Russell Westbrook, while his All-Defensive second team featured Boston Celtics guard Jaylen Brown, who received his one and only All-Defensive vote from Dennis Scott, and was even chosen ahead of his teammate Marcus Smart, who made the All-Defensive first team that season. Dennis Scott was also the only media member that season to have Minnesota Timberwolves guard Josh Okogie on his All-Rookie first team ballot, and even chose him over DeAndre Ayton for third place in Rookie of the Year voting, which was Okogie's only vote for that award. And while those two votes did raise a few eyebrows, it then made a lot more sense considering the fact that Dennis Scott and Josh Okogie are both Georgia Tech alum. Then we have Richard Walker of the Gaston Gazette, who was the only voter that season that left Atlanta Hawks guard Trae Young completely off of his Rookie of the Year ballot, and was also the only voter to not have Los Angeles Clippers guard Lou Williams on his sixth Man of the Year ballot. So now that we've seen some of the more controversial voters, let's now look at specific categories, starting with the Most Improved Player of the Year voting, where Oklahoma City Thunder forward Jeremy Grant received his one and only vote from Eric Horn, who was coincidentally enough covering the Oklahoma City Thunder as a sports web editor for the Oklahoman. Then we have San Antonio Spurs guard Bryn Forbes, who received his only vote from Jeff McDonald, who's been covering the Spurs as a beat writer for over a decade for the San Antonio Express News. Now, another questionable ballot that must be pointed out comes from Vincent Goodwill of Yahoo Sports, who was the Chicago Bulls' insider for NBC Chicago from 2015 right up until the start of the 2018-19 season, and was coincidentally enough the only media member that gave Chicago Bulls guard Zach LaVine a Most Improved Player of the Year vote that season. Now, as for the all-defensive teams, questionable ballots included Kenneth Lau, who we've already covered, as well as Massimo Lopez, whose all-defensive first-team ballot featured James Harden of the Houston Rockets and Stephen Curry of the Golden State Warriors, while his all-defensive second team consisted of Kyrie Irving of the Boston Celtics and Damian Lillard of the Portland Trail Blazers. Then we have Bill Oram of The Athletic, who was the only voter that season to pencil in Bradley Beal as one of the guards on his all-defensive second-team ballot. Diego Martinez of Reforma, which is a Mexican outlet, had Russell Westbrook of the Oklahoma City Thunder on his first-team ballot along with James Harden, while his all-defensive second team featured De'Aaron Fox of the Sacramento Kings, whose one and only vote came from Diego Martinez. Then there's Amin El-Hassan and Cassidy Hubbard, both of ESPN, as well as Josh Robbins of The Athletic, who cost a deserving forward an all-defensive second-team vote by having Philadelphia 76ers center Joel Embiid on their second-team ballots as one of their forwards. Meanwhile, Jackie McMullen of ESPN had Memphis Grizzlies forward Kyle Anderson on her all-defensive second-team ballot, even though he played in just 43 games that season, and in doing so, chose to exclude players like PJ Tucker, Klay Thompson, Jimmy Butler, and Kawhi Leonard, who are all notable defenders that played in more games than Kyle Anderson that season. Now, the next set of ballots that we'll be looking at are from All-NBA voters, starting with Michelle Beadle, formerly of ESPN, who chose to put Eric Gordon on her All-NBA third team, ahead of players like Klay Thompson, Kemba Walker, and Bradley Beal. Meanwhile, Phoenix Suns guard Devin Booker received his one and only All-NBA vote that season from none other than Dwayne Rankin, who covers the Phoenix Suns as an insider for the Arizona Republic. Next, we have Justin Termine of SiriusXM Radio, who was one of the three voters that kept Kawhi Leonard completely off of his All-NBA ballot and justified that decision on Twitter by stating that while Kawhi Leonard is arguably the best player in the world, resting 22 games couldn't be overlooked. And when he was then asked why he had picked Joel Embiid to be on his All-NBA second team, given the fact that he had missed just 4 less games than Kawhi Leonard, his answer was that most of Joel Embiid's absence that season was injury-related, which is actually incorrect. Most of Joel Embiid's absence that season was either due to rest or load management. The only time Joel Embiid was out due to injury was in late February after sustaining a knee injury which sidelined him for 8 games. But even that injury and its timetable are questionable, considering the fact that Joel Embiid played in the All-Star game just 5 days after sustaining said injury. But more importantly, there's no actual way of knowing which players are missing games due to rest and which players are missing games due to an actual injury. Because NBA teams have always been known to lie on their injury report about the specific nature of a player's absence, and because the terms used for a player's absence are so ambiguous. Whether it's rest, load management, or soreness, which can also be categorized as load management. However, in going back to Justin Termine, please keep in mind that while he chose to leave Kawhi Leonard completely off of his All-NBA ballot in 2019, this is the same voter who during the 2017-18 season had Stephen Curry on his All-NBA second team and Jimmy Butler on his All-NBA third team, even though they played in just 51 and 59 games respectively that season. But for many of these voters, the inconsistency on their ballots can better be observed when their All-NBA selections are put alongside their MVP votes. Like Royce Young of ESPN, who had Damian Lillard third on his MVP ballot, second to only James Harden amongst guards, but then chose to put Damian Lillard on his All-NBA second team behind Stephen Curry, who was his second guard on the All-NBA first team alongside James Harden. But if Damian Lillard was in fact an MVP candidate, second to only James Harden amongst guards, then why wasn't he on his All-NBA first team with James Harden? It just doesn't make any sense. Especially when that's juxtaposed to a consistent ballot, like that of Yahoo Sports senior NBA insider Chris Haynes, who also had Damian Lillard third on his MVP ballot, second to James Harden amongst guards, but unlike Royce Young, had the presence of mind to put Damian Lillard on his All-NBA first team ballot alongside James Harden. And so when looking back at the 100 MVP voters from the 2018-19 season, we see that only 52% of them were consistent with their ballot in that regard, while the other 48 were not. Now, the first set of voters that we'll be looking at are those who had Damian Lillard third, fourth, or fifth on their MVP ballot, second to James Harden amongst guards, but then chose to put Lillard on their All-NBA second team behind Stephen Curry. These voters are Kelly Iko of The Athletic, David Cobb of the Memphis Commercial Appeal, Tim Bontemps of ESPN, Rob Mahoney of Sports Illustrated, Bill Simmons of The Ringer, Greg Anthony of TNT, Scott Agnews of The Athletic, Brian Mahoney of The Associated Press, Kurt Heelan of NBC Sports, Steve Ashburner and John Schumann of NBA.com, Eric Horn of The Oklahoman, Michelle Beadle, Doris Burke and Zach Lowe of ESPN, Rachel Nichols and Rosalind Gold-Onwoody of ESPN, Kevin Harlan of TNT, Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated, Mike Singer of the Denver Post, Ryan Wolstadt of the Toronto Sun, Jeff Zilgett of USA Today, Mirjam Swanson of the Southern California News Group, and Casey Johnson of the Chicago Tribune. Then there's Mark Jackson of ESPN, who had Russell Westbrook fifth on his MVP ballot, second to only James Harden amongst guards, but then chose to put Russell Westbrook on his All-NBA second team behind Stephen Curry. Meanwhile, Greg Anthony of TNT also had Russell Westbrook of the Oklahoma City Thunder fifth on his MVP ballot, however third amongst guards behind James Harden and Damian Lillard, but then chose to put Westbrook on his All-NBA third team behind Stephen Curry and Kyrie Irving. Now, the next batch of voters are those who had Paul George of the Oklahoma City Thunder third, fourth, or fifth on their MVP ballot, second to only Giannis Antetokounmpo amongst forwards, but then chose to put Paul George on their All-NBA second team behind Kevin Durant. These voters are Marv Albert of TNT, Zach Harper of The Athletic, Vincent Goodwill of Yahoo Sports, Mark Kestisher and Ramona Shelburne of ESPN, Eric Woodyard of the Deseret News, Casey Johnson of the Chicago Tribune, John Barry of ESPN, Reggie Miller of TNT, John Schumann of NBA.com, Chris Broussard of Fox Sports 1, Dennis Scott of TNT, and Joe Varden of The Athletic. Then there's Weiping Zhang of CCTV, who had Paul George fifth on his MVP ballot, second to Giannis Antetokounmpo amongst forwards, but then chose to put Paul George on his All-NBA third team behind Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Kawhi Leonard. Meanwhile, Diego Martinez of Reforma had Kawhi Leonard third on his MVP ballot, second to only Giannis Antetokounmpo amongst forwards, but then chose to put Kawhi Leonard on his All-NBA second team behind Kevin Durant. Then we have Dwayne Rankin of the Arizona Republic, who also had Kawhi Leonard third on his MVP ballot, second to only Giannis Antetokounmpo amongst forwards, but then chose to put Kawhi Leonard on his All-NBA second team behind Paul George. Now the next set of voters includes those who had Nikola Jokic third, fourth, or fifth on their MVP ballot, first among centers, and yet still chose to put him on their All-NBA second team behind Joel Embiid. These voters are Chris Broussard of Fox Sports 1, Dennis Scott of TNT, Sherrod Blakely of NBC Boston, Bill Simmons of The Ringer, Casey Stern and Matt Weiner of TNT, Howard Beck of The Bleacher Report, Casey Johnson of The Chicago Tribune, Ramona Shelburne of ESPN, Rachel Nichols, also of ESPN, Weiping Zhang of CCTV, Joe Varden of The Athletic, Reed Forgave of CBSSports.com, Andrew Sharp of Sports Illustrated, Josh Robbins of The Athletic, and Rob Mahoney of Sports Illustrated. Then we have Tim Bontemps of ESPN, who gave Nikola Jokic a fifth place MVP vote, first among centers, but then chose to put Nikola Jokic on his All-NBA third team behind Joel Embiid and Rudy Gobert. Next is Massimo Lopez, who had Joel Embiid third on his MVP ballot, first among centers, but then chose to put Joel Embiid on his All-NBA second team behind Nikola Jokic. And last but not least is the NBA's All-Rookie team, where for the first time since 1985, the 5 members of the NBA's All-Rookie first team were also the first 5 picks of the NBA draft. However, Jaren Jackson Jr. of the Memphis Grizzlies was the only one out of the 5 who wasn't unanimously voted onto the All-Rookie team, as he received 99 out of a possible 100 votes. That one missing vote being from Jeff McDonald of the San Antonio Express News, who thought that there was at least 10 better rookies than Jaren Jackson Jr. that season, such as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Los Angeles Clippers, Kevin Huerter of the Atlanta Hawks, Mitchell Robinson of the New York Knicks, Landry Shamet of the Los Angeles Clippers, and Aaron Holiday of the Indiana Pacers, whose one and only All-Rookie vote came from Jeff McDonald. Now, while all of these voters are certainly entitled to their own opinions, these opinions, if they are to be taken seriously, should not only be educated, but consistent. And unfortunately, what these 2018-19 NBA ballots have shown is that many media members don't take the voting process as seriously as they should, which is inexcusable given the financial implications that some of their votes may or may not have.
So I got news that I got a vote to be on the All-NBA team. Baby, did you vote for me?
No.
I don't know who voted for me neither.
I voted for Klay Thompson.
I voted for Klay too, but I don't get to say so. With that being said, whoever voted for me, I do appreciate you, but you definitely could have saved that vote for one of the people who
Klay
deserved
Thompson.
it. One of the people who deserved it, but I am appreciative of the appreciation of my last year, but I didn't need the vote. But thank you. But I didn't need it. But thank you.
You know who needed it? Klay Thompson.
In your mind, is he an all-defensive team caliber guy?
Yeah, but I mean, all defensive team is voted on by people who don't really know the game.